urgent update, the war just took a dark new turn. The US holds critical weapons for Ukraine, Patriots, Stinger and guided rocket system frozen. In Azerbaijan, FSB agents are jailed, Russia stunned. Serbia explodes with protests against Putin ally Vucic. And now North Korea mourns soldiers killed in Ukraine, while preparing to send even more. Plus, is the Essex of Ewell falling apart? China, Iran and Russia are fracturing fast. This is Ukraine Today. I'm Zaroslava Kolesnikova and I am here to tell you what's really happening in Ukraine and the world. Stay with us. The Pentagon just froze vital AIMS shipments to Ukraine. Patriot, interceptors, Stingers, high fires, 155mm shells and more are off the table. Western media reports that a top Pentagon official made the call in early June. As Russia escalates and Ukraine fights for survival, will we now face the battlefield without US firepower? What does this mean for the war and for Ukraine's future? Find out in this urgent report.
No interceptors for the Patriots. The Pentagon has suspended the supply of certain types of weapons and ammunition to Ukraine. Several Western media outlets, including Politico and NBC News, have received this information from their sources. The decision was reportedly made by the head of the Pentagon's political department, Elbridge Colby, back at the beginning of June after a review of the department's ammunition stockpiles. There are said to be concerns about the depletion of America's own reserves. The suspension has also affected the aid that was promised by the previous Joe Biden administration. These include, in particular, interceptors for the Patriot air defense system, 155mm shells, Hellfire-guided missiles, rocket systems, GMLRS rockets, and Stinger manpads. Journalists point out that the Pentagon's decision came into effect precisely at a time when Ukraine is repelling some of the largest Russian missile and drone attacks on civilian targets in Kyiv and other cities, and this has already raised concerns among Ukraine's allies. According to estimates, the suspension will last until the stockpile inspections are completed and may be extended if any shortages are discovered.
But while we are physically moving ammunition production out of reach of our enemy, our main partner, the United States, is independently restricting the supply of certain types of weapons to us. This has been officially confirmed by the White House. White House spokesperson Anna Kelly told CBS News that the United States is suspending part of its arms deliveries to Ukraine amid its war with Russia, and that the decision was made with America's national interests as a priority after the Department of Defense reviewed the support the U.S. provides to other countries around the world. It's unpleasant news, let's be honest.
Well, it should be added here that among the ammunition and missiles are Patriot interceptors, high-precision GMLRS missiles, and other important systems that Ukraine was hoping for and counting on.
Well, let's be honest, we were mentally prepared for such a turn of events, but are we technically ready? Do we actually have anything to replace this with right now? Because we are holding many negotiations with our European partners. They are ready to help us and they are helping. But is it really possible to compensate for this? And how insidious is such a move from the US at this moment?
We have understood this over the past few months. Even a month ago, the Minister of Defense, the head of the Pentagon, stated that supplying weapons to Ukraine is not a priority. At the same time, the answer is very simple. Can we do it? Well, here you have the strikes on Yasenovata, on facilities in Luhansk, on facilities in Donetsk. Those strikes that were carried out with Western weaponry, most likely. In addition, the development of our own production once again was confirmed by the strikes of the Ukrainian Peklo missile. Strikes with the Ukrainian Ruta missile were confirmed. So in reality, Palyanitia, we actually know what to do. Yes, it is more difficult. Let's not, get into spreading overly positive vibes and topics here. We need to look at the situation, soberly take off the rose-colored glasses. Obviously, without help from the US, things are much more difficult. For use many times more difficult. However, at the same time, I hope that the work done last week at the NATO summit is having a positive impact on this situation in two ways. What is definitely having a positive effect is the supply of weapons and the strikes we are already seeing. B, what is also definitely having a positive impact is what is happening with investments in Ukrainian drone production, the purchase of Ukrainian drones, the potential opening of exports, and the systematic establishment of cooperation with NATO countries. What else is having a positive effect is that European countries are also sobering up and looking at the situation in the world more maturely and are starting to invest more in their own armaments and to take action. And that's it. The last option, not in the context of our European partners, but our NATO partner, the United States, is about our opportunities. At the moment, it is still possible to purchase aid from the United States using foreign funds. So I wouldn't give up so quickly here and would expect a new round of negotiations.
On the one hand, we are saying that European countries have finally started to look realistically at the threat and the potential threat to themselves. There is information emerging about the preparation of hospitals in alliance countries, particularly in Europe, and about the Baltic countries and Finland withdrawing from the Ottawa Convention. Well, on the one hand, yes, this significant development has finally happened, but on the other hand, don't you genuinely think this could potentially be a negative factor for us in the long run? Because the main stronghold is here, and right now Ukraine is holding back the enemy on its own territory. But this preparation by NATO countries, on the other hand, is also diverting resources for themselves. It seems like they're saying they need to stockpile. What do you think? How do these two events correlate? What can you say about this?
That's exactly why they're increasing their defense budgets and including Ukraine's needs in their defense spending. That's one thing. Secondly, there's another realistic aspect we need to consider. According to the president, we're mobilizing about 25,000 people per month. So Europe has been unable for half a year to find 25,000 troops from all across Europe to potentially send to Ukraine to support a monitoring mission. What are we even talking about if all of Europe can't gather 25,000 people, while, according to the president, we mobilize that many in a month? I mean, well, today we are the only country in Europe that is truly capable of fully resisting the Russians. And Europeans understand this very well. There are no fools among them. They are very good at planning. They are very good at forecasting and anticipating certain outcomes. That's why they understand that from a cynical and pragmatic point of view, it is more beneficial for them today to help Ukraine and to do so. This is happening against the backdrop of recent events. So, in fact, once again, I say we return to the point that they made the decision over the years to increase the expenditures of their gross domestic product per capita. Specifically, the percentage of budgets allocated to armaments, including Ukrainian expenditures as well.
Shocking turn in the Russia-Azerbaijan standoff. 8 Russians jailed in Baku, visibly beaten, accused of drug trafficking and cybercrime. And it's all on camera. Is this the payback for brutal arrests of Azerbaijanis in Russia? As tensions rise, President Zelensky called Azerbaijan's leader with a powerful message. Could this brewing conflict actually benefit Ukraine? Don't miss what comes next.
With bruises under their eyes and badly beaten faces, Russian citizens appear before the Azerbaijani court. Baku accuses them of smuggling drugs from Iran and cyber fraud. 8 people have been ordered to be detained for 4 months. Among them are employees of the Russian propaganda agency Sputnik, who were suspected of having ties to the FSB. After the raid on the Kremlin media office, the number of their staff was reduced from 40 to 1. Such mask shows in Azerbaijan have become a de facto response to the raids by Russian law enforcement on people from Azerbaijan in Yekaterinburg. There, about 50 people were detained, allegedly in connection with murders that took place in 2001, 2010 and 2011. The arrests were carried out by FSB officers with particular brutality. 2 brothers, Ziadin and Hussein Safarov, died in the police station and in the service vehicle. Their bodies have already been transferred to Baku. The local forensic examination found signs of beating and torture. The prosecutor's office has opened a criminal case on the fact of the intentional murder of 2 citizens by Russian law enforcement officers.
After the skull was opened during the autopsy, hemorrhages were found in the hard and soft tissues of the brain. The blunt trauma to the chest was accompanied by multiple displaced rib fractures on both sides along several anatomical lines. There were about 7 or 8 displaced rib fractures on each side.
Relations have deteriorated to such an extent that Azerbaijan has already cancelled all Russian cultural events, both at the state and private levels. There are reports in the press that Russian schools are being switched to the state language. Allegedly, parents have already been informed about this. The visit of the Azerbaijani delegation to Moscow was also cancelled. The Kremlin, for its part, is in no hurry to resolve the conflict. They do not admit their guilt in the deaths of Azerbaijanis. They say Baku is exaggerating the problem. Meanwhile, arrests continue in Russia. In Yekaterinburg, security forces are harshly detaining the head of the Azerbaijani diaspora, Shakhin Shakhlinsky. The Russian BBC service reports that his car was stopped on the street, the windows were smashed, he was pulled out of the vehicle and handcuffed. After interrogation, he was eventually released. The Azerbaijani ambassador has been summoned to the carpet at the Russian Foreign Ministry in Moscow over the detained employees of the Sputnik agency. The president of Ukraine has already called Azerbaijani leader Ilham Aliyev to express support and condolences. According to Volodymyr Zelensky, this is not the first time the Kremlin has humiliated its neighbors.
I expressed our full and unwavering support and solidarity to the nation of Azerbaijan. Now it is clear that Russia is actively fueling a new and dangerous campaign of hostility against its immediate neighbors. And after the brutal and tragic murder of 2 innocent members of the Azerbaijani community residing in Russia, it is also directly and overtly threatening the sovereign Azerbaijani state itself. It is critically important that all involved partners perceive this situation in precisely the same way as a significant and immediate threat, not just to one individual or entity, but indeed to absolutely everyone involved, to everyone who is neighboring Russia. By brutally killing some individuals and deeply humiliating others, Russia is actively trying to intimidate and subjugate absolutely everyone in its path.
The current crisis between Baku and Moscow is already the second in the past 2 years. In December 2024, Russian air defense shot down a passenger plane belonging to Azerbaijan Airlines. The aircraft was en route from Baku to Grozny. After being hit, the pilots managed to direct it to the Kazakh city of Aktau, where it crashed. More than half of the passengers died at that time. At first, the Kremlin concealed information about the downing of the plane, just as they had done with flight MH17. Later, however, they admitted to this fact. Putin called Aliyev to express his condolences, but evidently the Azerbaijani leader never received a proper apology or saw those responsible held to account. Azerbaijani media speculated that this was precisely why Aliyev did not go to Moscow for the May 9th parade, even though the head of the Russian Orthodox Church, Patriarch Kirill, personally went to invite his entire family at Putin's request. In addition, analysts see a geopolitical basis in the current conflict between Baku and Moscow. Azerbaijan has long been trying to challenge Moscow's dominance in the South Caucasus and is demanding greater respect for itself. After Russia's position was weakened by the war in Ukraine, the Azerbaijanis successfully eliminated the self-proclaimed Nagorno-Karabakh Republic and brought it back under their control. Now Baku is trying to take away Moscow's monopoly on gas supplies and has already intercepted part of the deliveries to Europe. Experts say it is not out of the question that this could even lead to the supply of lethal weapons to Ukraine. So far, Azerbaijan has only provided us with humanitarian aid. Oksana Tkachenko, TSN 1+1, Marathon, United News.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now. Tens of thousands take to the streets of Serbia in a shocking uprising against pro-Russian leader Alexander Vucic. The people demand change. The government trembles. Is this the beginning of Serbia breaking free from the Kremlin's grip? A dramatic turn in the Balkans. Don't miss what's really happening.
Barricades made of garbage bins and metal fences. The center of the Serbian capital now looks more like a tent camp. For the third day, downtown Belgrade has been completely blocked by protesters.
We are defending the country that was taken from us. Slowly, they took our country away from us.
The Gazela Bridge is blocked, one of the most important transport hubs in the Serbian capital. Central roads are blocked in at least 22 other cities across the country. The police removed the barricades, but the protesters set them up again, declaring that the streets will not be unblocked until the detained activists are released. Violent clashes between protesters and Serbian police broke out on Saturday night. At that time, tens of thousands of people took to the streets in anti-government protests, demanding early elections and the resignation of President Alexander Vucic. Instead, they were dispersed with batons, stun grenades and pepper spray. In response, the demonstrators overturned trash bins and threw flares and stones. The police detained nearly 100 people, half of whom are still behind bars. Several dozen officers and civilians were injured.
We won't give up. We want President Vucic to resign.
We can't tolerate this any longer. This has been going on for far too long. We're mired in corruption. It's time to finally put an end to all of this.
One of the largest protest movements in Serbia in recent times was sparked by a tragedy in the city of Novi Sad. Anti-government rallies began as early as last November. People took to the streets after the collapse of a new roof at a recently renovated train station where 16 people died. Both then and now, the protesters accuse the authorities of corruption and demand the resignation of the government and President Alexander Vucic. Vucic himself called the protest participants terrorists, accusing them of being involved in a foreign conspiracy allegedly aimed at overthrowing the government. He repeats the well-known Kremlin narrative about external control. He claims that the street protests are being funded from other countries. However, he did not specify exactly which countries.
There are no negotiations with terrorists and those who wanted to destroy the state. There will be accountability in every sphere and every area of public life.
A longtime friend of Putin in Europe, Vucic has been in power for almost 12 years. He has repeatedly held early elections to consolidate his power. He rejected the protesters' latest demand, stating that parliamentary elections, like the presidential ones, will not be held before 2027. However, it seems that protest sentiments in Serbia are approaching a climax. Farmers who have blocked key highways in Belgrade and other major cities with their tractors are joining the students who are leading the strike. And people have no intention of stopping. Olena Honcharenko, Ukraine Marathon, United News.
Shocking scenes from North Korea. For the first time, Kim Jong-un appears to grieve over troops killed in Ukraine. But it's not over. New intelligence reveals Pyongyang may send even more soldiers to aid Russia this summer. What is Kim getting in return? Missile tech, satellite secrets and global outrage. They did it and now they are doubling down.
For the first time, North Korean authorities have shown the bodies of their soldiers who died fighting on Russia's side in Ukraine. Photographs showing North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un attending the funerals of these soldiers were displayed during an event dedicated to the anniversary of the signing of the Comprehensive Strategic Partnership Agreement between Russia and North Korea. South Korean publications claim that the footage was taken even before Moscow acknowledged the presence of North Korean troops in the Kursk region in April 2025.
Those present at the repatriation ceremony, including Kim, were dressed in winter clothing, which suggests that the event most likely took place several months ago and that the return of the remains began as early as last winter. North Korea likely wanted to present the fallen soldiers not just as victims, but as part of a victorious narrative, says Hong Min, senior research fellow at the Korea Institute for National Unification, from a publication by the South Korean agency Yonhap.
The presence of DPRK troops in the Kursk region was first announced by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky in December 2024. According to South Korean intelligence estimates, from January to March 2025, Pyongyang lost about 4,700 of its soldiers in the war against Ukraine. Ukrainian intelligence estimates the total number of military personnel that North Korea has sent to Russia at 12,000. Reuters, citing sources, reports that Pyongyang is preparing to send a new batch of troops to the Kremlin.
The timeline for this additional deployment is such that it could happen as early as July or August. As the basis for its assessment, the National Intelligence Service refers to a new batch of troops to be sent by North Korea and the recent visit to Pyongyang by a high-ranking Russian official. In exchange for North Korea sending artillery shells and missiles to Russia, Pyongyang is likely receiving technical consultations on satellite launches and missile guidance systems. From a Reuters report.
According to Kirilo Budanov, head of the main intelligence directorate of Ukraine's Ministry of Defense, the agency expects an increase in the number of North Korean military personnel on Russian territory in the near future. Some of them will be sent under the guise of volunteers who have signed contracts with the DPRK Ministry of Defense. In return, Moscow is providing Pyongyang with weapons for a possible future confrontation with Seoul.
Transport technology.
Russia is transferring technology, equipment and so on, and is setting up Shahed drone production in North Korea. North Korea has only one adversary, a real adversary, and that is South Korea. There are no others. And Russia is giving them technology and weapons. In fact, I can tell you that. For example, the first Panzer S-1 systems have already appeared in Pyongyang. They are already on combat duty there, guarding the capital. The Russians are retraining Korean personnel, and soon the Koreans will be able to operate this equipment independently.
The Japanese publication NHK World, citing its sources, reported that North Korea is planning to send 25,000 North Korean workers to a Russian drone manufacturing plant in the Republic of Tatarstan. According to experts, the training of DPRK specialists on the territory of the aggressor country and the transfer of new technologies to the regime in Pyongyang indicate both dictatorships' plans to strengthen their cooperation.
The cooperation here is taking place on the broadest possible scale, and in my opinion, this is truly a vivid example of the creation of this new axis of evil. For example, when it comes to Russia and Iran, we see that Russia is showing rather weak results in some areas. But when we look at the cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang, there is a very strong connection here. And unfortunately for the civilized world, it keeps growing with each passing month.
The cooperation between Moscow and Pyongyang is also expanding at the diplomatic level. Previously, the Kremlin adhered to the UN sanctions regime against the DPRK, but in 2024, satellite images appeared showing oil tankers from Russian ports being sent to North Korea in violation of the restrictions. Furthermore, in March 2025, at a UN Security Council meeting, Russia blocked the extension of the mandate for the panel monitoring compliance with the sanctions regime against the DPRK. Andrei Dmitrenko for Freedom Television Channel.
The so-called Essex of evil is cracking. As Iran stumbles in its war with Israel, the Atlantic reports that Russia, China and Iran aren't as united as they claim. Meanwhile, Moscow's grip on global influence weakness, China is pushing Russia out of Cuba. Is the Kremlin losing its last allies, or is this just the beginning of a deeper split? Find out in our full report.
After Israel and then the United States struck Iran, the response from China and Russia was surprisingly restrained, writes The Atlantic.
China's mild response is not just a blow to Iran, it may also indicate that the much-publicized no-limits partnership between Xi and Putin might not be as solid as Moscow and Beijing claim. Russia also has interests that diverge from those of Iran, and it too is conspicuously refraining from assisting the Islamic Republic. From The Atlantic.
By continuing the war of attrition in Ukraine, Putin has made confrontation with the West the cornerstone of his foreign policy. In this context, analysts at The Atlantic note that rapprochement with Iran and its partners in the axis of evil made sense. The two countries signed a strategic partnership agreement. Tehran supplied Russia with missiles and Shahed drones, but what was initially a beneficial dynamic for Russia quickly turned into a strategic headache. First, Israel destroyed Iran's partners Hamas and Hezbollah. Later, in 2024, Israel struck back at Iran's missile production and air defense systems, including Russian-made S-300 missiles.
In Syria, we also saw that Russia was initially very invested in the survival of the Assad regime after all. Since it got bogged down in Ukraine and had no additional resources, it was unable to help. And essentially all those efforts were wasted. Similarly, in Iran, we are seeing a very similar dynamic. Russia has no capacity to provide assistance, nor is it seeking to do so. Just recently, an investigation was published regarding an FSB document leak. Both countries are very actively spying on each other. They have a clear enemy that they both oppose the West, the United States.
Tehran's other partner, China, in turn, was in no hurry to supply Iran with short-range missiles and other air defense systems, according to The Atlantic. Instead, Beijing merely condemned Israel's initial strike. Chinese President Xi Jinping waited 4 days before calling for de-escalation. And Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi refrained from condemning Israel's actions during his conversation with his Israeli counterpart.
Since Israel began its military strikes against Iran, China has been actively engaging in diplomacy, including maintaining contact with Iran, Israel and other parties, in order to achieve de-escalation as quickly as possible and prevent further turmoil in the region.
After the Iranian parliament voted to close the Strait of Hormuz, a representative of Beijing for Foreign Affairs emphasized the Persian Gulf is one of the world's most important trade routes. And he called on partners to ensure that military actions do not have a greater impact on global economic growth. According to analysts, such statements from Beijing indicate that Iran is important to China in terms of economic interests, since Tehran exports about 90% of its oil to China.
China receives between 13 and 14% of its crude oil from Iran annually, and Iran is heavily dependent on China in its trade. About a third of Iran's imports and exports are with China, thus there is quite a significant imbalance. Iran is much more economically dependent on China. But China is also significantly dependent on Iran for oil, which is under sanctions and reaches China through intermediaries such as Malaysia and Singapore.
China is also strengthening its economic presence in Cuba. Thus, this is yet another region where Moscow is losing its influence, according to Reuters. For example, in Cuba, Beijing plans to implement more than 50 new solar energy projects. Initially, Russia was expected to participate in these initiatives, but most of them were never realized. Cuba is currently experiencing a deep economic crisis, and the state of its energy system is critical. Over the past year, the national power grid has failed 4 times, leaving millions of people without electricity and paralyzing the operations of schools and businesses. 2 years ago, Russia promised Cuba significant support.
Since 2018, Cuba has been participating in China's Belt and Road Initiative. Since then, Beijing has invested in key facilities, transport, port and telecommunications infrastructure. Against the backdrop of Moscow's inability to provide loans, Russia is losing its status as Cuba's main foreign economic partner. Chinese investments could serve as a lifeline for the Cuban economy. Meanwhile, Russia, mired in its war against Ukraine and in crisis, has faded as a historical partner, from a Reuters publication.
Already in 2025, Cuba opened its first solar substation near the capital, Havana. The ceremony was attended by the Chinese ambassador to Cuba, Hua Xin, and Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel. In his statement, highly praised the project as cooperation, and I quote, "with our brotherly Republic of China." Kristina Dombrovskaya for Freedom Television Channel.
That's all for today on Ukraine Today. If you want to keep independent news alive and the truth on the front lines, support our work. Become a sponsor, share this video and help us fight back against silence and propaganda. Your voice matters. Subscribe, comment and stay with us, because every update brings us one step closer to victory. See you soon!